Good morning, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this latest Indica Books Q&A. And as you know, we bring in regularly authors to talk about their books, their writing experience, their publishing journey. Today, we have a slightly different set of people to talk to. They have written a book, yes, but this is a coffee table book. It's a gorgeously illustrated coffee table book where you could spend minutes and minutes just poring over each and every page, each and every photograph. There seems to be a story behind each of those photos. So the two authors are Rishi Agarwal and Arun Saha, and they have written this book, Varanasi, A Passage to Immortality. Before I bring them on, I want to share a few lines about each one of them. So Rishi Agarwal, he is an avid traveler, as he is going to talk about, and he loves photography, which is obviously reflected in the book that he has co-authored with Arun. He sees beauty in the everyday and uses his camera as a poetic tool to tell extraordinary stories of ordinary life on the streets. And while he's passionate about all of India, his college years in Varanasi left a deep imprint on his persona. It is these reflections that he hopes to capture in his book that we're going to talk about, Varanasi, A Passage to Immortality. Now, about his background, Rishi is a technology entrepreneur and who obviously believes in the potential of technology to transform human lives. And he has co-founded Team Lease RegTech and currently serves as the CEO. And he has pursued a postgraduate diploma in management from IIM Calcutta and a degree from IIT Varanasi. And you can follow him on Twitter at through Rishi Lens on Instagram, sorry, and on at Rishi Lens on Facebook. Now, as for Arun, so Arun Saha is a Pune-based photographer who has spent 16 years with the Indian Air Force as a technical photographer, and I think there's a story right there in itself that we'll want to talk about at some day. Uh, so he specializes in street and travel photography and is a co-author of this book that we are going to talk about. He is a chief photo mentor at Arun Saha Photography and has conducted hundreds of photo tours and photography workshops. He's the recipient of the National Photography Award as the Best Amateur Photographer of the year 2019-20. There's nothing amateurish about the photos that you will find in this book. They are amazing, by the way. In addition, he has won the prestigious Performance Award in HPA China 2017, the Maharashtra Government Tourism Award 2021, and India Tourism Mumbai Award 2022. He also serves as a guest lecturer of photography for different universities like Sandeep University in Nashik, Techno India University in Kolkata, and Visual Art at their VFX and Visual Art departments. Presently, he is associated with the India Today Group as a freelance photographer for their magazine. And with that, a very, very brief introduction. Welcome Rishi and Arun to this Indica Books Q&A.
Well, thank you so much, Abhinav, for having us on the show.
Oh,
Hi,
my
Abhinav. Thank you
pleasure.
so much.
My pleasure, likewise, Arun. Uh, okay, for those of you who want to follow us, that is Indica Books, we are on Twitter at Indica Books. We have a Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Indic Book Club. So we'll talk more about Indica Books in the coming during the course of the session. But first of all, let me start off with the book. See, a coffee table book has a special place in any house. Even for book lovers, a coffee table book will always find a special place of pride in the bookshelf, in a book rack, on the table, or wherever. And this one on Varanasi is an amazing book. Uh, Let me ask you, so when we spoke earlier, Rishi, you talked about all the years that you've spent in Varanasi and how they informed your perspective of the city, not just from a pilgrim's point of view, which is what a lot of us who are not natives of Varanasi would want to go to the city for. So tell us a little about how come you fell in how come you fell in love with Varanasi so much?
Well, Abhinav, that's a story in itself. About 27 years ago, well, back in 1995, same month, July, I via IIT JE I decided to take up my 4-year engineering degree in BTech in ITBHU at that time, and now IIT Varanasi. It was one of those rainy days, rainy evenings. We got there late in the night, and my first experience of Varanasi was not very pleasant. I found it to be an extremely crowded, congested, confusing, and an overwhelming city. Back in the day, there was no concept of Google Maps. To get to Mughal Sarai, from Mughal Sarai all the way to our hostel was a nightmare. Uh, Roads were unmarked, full of potholes. We got to the hostel in the middle of the night. There was an electricity cut. So it was not the most pleasant experience. And from there, in about a year, to turn into a fan, to find Varanasi as a place where I could go to literally several times a year, is that transformation which I went through in the very first year of engineering.
Fascinating. So, see, if we look at a lot of temple towns, one of the things that strikes us is that the infrastructure, unfortunately, has not kept pace with the growth of the town. And uh, it is something that puts off a lot of people on the one hand. On the other hand, I've also heard arguments from people saying that this is a pilgrimage city. This is not meant to be a tourist city. This is not SL World that you just drive in your car and go to a temple, have darshan, and come back and drive away. But the reality is that we all like some material comforts. We like the roads to be well paved. We like the streets to be clean and all. So, what are the changes, if any? And I'm assuming that there have been changes, but let's just put it this way: what are the changes that you've seen in the city over the years, from 27 years ago to now?
Oh, just an amazing amount of change. And I think good change, right? I mean, changes are of two types, right? Changes which would make concrete jungles out of an ancient city like Varanasi, changes which will make flyovers and bridges in those narrow alleys, which actually create a great photogenic city, changes which are not the most desirable when it comes to protecting the legacy of one of the most ancient civilizations in the world. So I would not want the city to change along those dimensions. But then the changes that have occurred, hygiene is one of the biggest ones. There was a time when I would go into the alleys of Varanasi, and staying 4 years, I had fantastic amount of opportunity. I had a hero cycle back in the day, and our hostel was in BHU. There was a 3.5 kilometer or so ride within the campus, and then you came out, and it was night and day. I mean, VHU was so beautiful, wonderful, uh, clean. And as soon as you came out in Lanka, you were right in the middle of an extremely crowded, congested place. And uh, you would go through the city. There would be cow dung all over the place. The roads would be horrible, to say the least. The cycle rickshaws had no discipline whatsoever. It would take hours if you genuinely wanted to go someplace. The funny thing was, Abhinav, which most people may not know, even the richest in Varanasi could not afford to buy a car, not because they couldn't pay for it, but because there was no place to ride. So back in the day, they used to buy a auto rickshaw, and that auto rickshaw was not the regular color. It used to be a blue auto rickshaw. Now, early days when we got to the city, we would just hail at the auto rickshaw, hoping that it would stop. And one of the funny observations was that no blue auto rickshaw would stop. And then we figured that actually those are private rickshaws, and the rich people sit in those auto rickshaws because there was no place to ride those cars. So over the years, I think that part, the cleanliness part, has changed dramatically. Those alleys which would turn deserted in the night with no light at all are well lit. The garbage is not there, the stink is not there. The ghats have become extremely clean. As Ganga water recedes, as you move from monsoons to summer, the water recedes, and when it recedes, it leaves a lot of mud on the ghats. And when I was there back in 90s, the mud would remain, and it would turn into you know stinking, garbage collected areas. Today, believe it or not, they actually wash the ghats every other day, if not every day. They're absolutely clean. There are garbage collection areas all over the place. Ghats are well lit. They have beautified the ghats in various ways. A lot of wall paintings are there. And Arun Saha, we'll talk to you. Arunda is an expert on photography, which is juxtaposition oriented. And in the book, you'll find a number of legendary photos that he has taken with beautiful juxtapositions of the wall paintings. I think these are all critical changes that have happened, and I think the biggest one by far is lighting, quality of ghats, and cleanliness.
So when you were saying that, it reminded me of one of the things that I read in the book, and we'll hopefully get to that, is chai pe adi, and I am fascinated by that phrase. But so Arun, tell me about your experiences with Varanasi. What brought you to the city? What got you fascinated with the photography, and what led to the collaboration for this book?
Yeah, we have. See, for the first time when I visited Varanasi, it was at my very young age, maybe during the 1980, 81, somewhere near that, when I was a class 2 student. That thing I remember. So when first I saw Varanasi from the Ghat with my parents, looked at it, and I found it is such a vast, with full of humanity, full of religiousness, full of spiritual things. At that very young age, I couldn't understand all the things, but one thing that came to my mind that time, that how can I take all this essence to my nearer and dearer one from there without taking all those people there. So that was the first thing came up in my mind at that very early age, when I never knew that in future I am going to become a professional photographer. So at the later stage, after maybe 25, 30 years later, when I first came to Varanasi as a professional photographer, and seeing the same vastness with a different perspective, that time I started understanding the spirituality, the life of the ghats, the sadhus, the common people, the boat people, everything, and those fascinated me so vastly, so nearly, that against the same thing had came to my mind, that okay, I want to take all this to the people who are not fortunate enough to see all the things with me. So over the years, I've been to Varanasi maybe 3 to 4 times a year, and as a professional photographer, as a photography mentor, so I take people there along with me to guide people there how to take good photographs, to take street shots in Varanasi, to take shots of the ghats, the life of the people, how they can represent Varanasi in a more lively or vivid way. But one thing was there, that generally every time what happens, maybe some 8 to 10 people come along with me, but what about the others who cannot afford, or maybe for the financial reason, maybe for the age reason, maybe for the shortage of time reason, so many people cannot accompany me over there in Varanasi. So the first feeling came to my mind, that why those people should be deprived from all these things, the beauty of Varanasi. So whatever the way I fail to capture Varanasi in my way, that people can understand Varanasi in a more inherited way, close to the heart way, from their own perspective. So that's how I try to capture Varanasi. And that's where when Rishi just proposed to me that, Arunda, let's go for a book on Varanasi, so that let us take all these things. Let's not keep all these things in our hard disk or in the social media. Let's take to the people. Let's get it printed on a book, and let's take to the people who are more interested to live with Varanasi in a more passionate way. So that was the time when this book, Varanasi, this book has come up, the idea has come up, and I'm thankful to Rishi that he has proposed me that idea, and that is all how it has started.
No, that is so true what you talk about, that when we see something like, when you come to a place like Varanasi, one of the thoughts that strikes you is that how can I capture all this and take this back with me? But obviously, you can't, and which is why I think photography serves as such a beautiful medium of capturing not only the memories of that place, but I think every photograph is in some ways also an expression of your own imagination of the place that you are taking a photo of. So tell me one thing. If someone wants to go to Varanasi as, doing a darshan at the temple and going to the ghats is obviously one part of it. But in general, what would your suggestion, advice be? And this is for both of you. What would your advice be to a person who wants to go to Varanasi?
So, Abhinav, the first thing that I would highly advise is to set your expectations right. Right. If you're expecting malls, theaters, multiplexes, fantastic shopping places, Varanasi is not Goa. Varanasi is not Dubai. Right. So, when you go there, you need to have that thought in mind that you have to go experience the place. Varanasi, in my opinion, is not to be seen. It has to be felt. It has to be experienced. And in my opinion, in one trip, one cannot do some of these things. So multiple trips are required. So first, getting your expectations right. Second, try and stay on the ghat, right? People try and look for five-star hotels far from the city to try and get the material comforts. You know what? There are enough and more decent hotels right on the ghat. When you wake up in the morning, early in the morning, hopefully 5:30ish, and when you open your window or door and you have a beautiful view of the Ganges and the rising sun from the horizon, that experience is just mesmerizing. To be able to get off your hotel room and walk the ghats and experience a life on the ghat is what you will miss if you stay in some hotel which is far. The second big one is plan to do Ganga Aarti at least 2-3 times, right? Once on the ghat, once from the boat, once from a distance. Ganga Aarti is just rejuvenating every time I sit and just listen to the chants and see the entire ritual. I mean, it is unparalleled. I have not seen or experienced anything like Ganga Aarti in my life. And I've seen quite a bit, I mean, have traveled around the world, but there's nothing that moves me, that shakes me as much as Ganga Aarti does. I would want people to not miss out street food. So while some of us over the years have become more urbanized and we prefer to sit in high-end restaurants and engage in fine dining, if you visit Varanasi and if you don't try the street foods, the various kinds of chaats, the various kinds of, you know, aloo puri, which is called kachori over there, you know, the pani puris, the tomato chaats, the, you know, the, and speaking, my mouth is already watering. You really have to try those chaats, and don't worry about the hygiene. They are quite hygienic. While the places may not look fancy or fashionable or glamorous, don't worry about them. The content is just mind blowing. Once you have those charts, you'll forget what the charts are in other parts of the country.
I completely agree with you on every count. First of all, my mouth is watering too, and I think I'll have to go and have some a samosa or a samosa or a jalebi tomorrow. So that doesn't do my plans for losing weight any good. But I will take that as yet another failure in a long line of failures of trying to lose weight. Number one. Second, I think the food. You're right. I think there's an inverse relationship between the decor of the place and the quality of the food, or how tasty the food is. So, Arunda, tell me one thing. Rishi said that come to Varanasi and plan on doing plan on going to the ghats and taking in the aarti at least 2-3 different times. Now, one of the things that I think a lot of people will be inspired by after reading and going through your book is, let's take those photographs, because that's one way of capturing memories. Now, tell us a little bit about your experience and how you went about taking those photographs, because in my limited experience, I've read or I've heard a lot of people say that the camera is the most important part of the photo, but I think that's the least important part of it. I think the lens, the framing, the lighting, and if you're taking really, really sharp shots in a tripod, these are the more essential things. But tell us a little bit about how you went about those photos. And I'll try and put up some of the photos on the screen again.
Sure. Yeah, Abhinav, totally agree with you and Rishi also. But I just want to put my 2 cents here in this scenario regarding taking good photographs of Varanasi. Okay, so at the very beginning, I want to say that my sincere advice to the photographers or any people, any tourist, whoever may, by seeing the books, the photographs of the books, if he or they want to go to Varanasi to take pictures, my first sincere advice is don't just go to Varanasi to take picture. Forget about picture. You first have to soak yourself with the spirituality and the essence of Varanasi first. From my very personal experience, and to be very honest, I'm telling you, uh, during my first and second visit to Varanasi. So that time I was a professional photographer, and every time wherever I used to go, I was with my camera, SLR. But during my first and second visit to Varanasi, I didn't take, means I couldn't able to take a single very good presentable photographs. I swear that it was the scenery, because that time it was, for me it was more to understand Varanasi, to see Varanasi, to view Varanasi, to realize Varanasi, its spirituality, its calmness, its holiness, its everything. Even, you know, whenever I go to Varanasi still now, I wish that I could take the taste of that lemon tea of the ghat, that the hivara of the street, to the people who couldn't make it to Varanasi. But that is next to impossible thing. Only what I can do, I can take a very good photograph of that, so that the seeing that photograph, someone can understand, someone can realize that how good that could have been. Right. So the first thing is that you have to realize, you have to take Varanasi at your heart. You have to understand Varanasi by heart, and then only see this photo. When you see this photo, you find that life getting end here. But many a places you can see that the life is just getting started in Varanasi. So life start and end, and then between the path, whatever it is, that everything happens in Varanasi. And just seeing a Sandhya Aarti or just seeing the activities in Ghat, it cannot justify exactly about Varanasi. So before becoming a good photographer of Varanasi, you must be a good learner of Varanasi. You learn Varanasi, you understand Varanasi, and then whenever you pick up the camera, definitely you'll get the best possible photographs from Varanasi. That's how actually I have done with my camera. I don't know how good I have done, but still I am not fully satisfied, because the vastness of Varanasi, it is so vast, it is so big, that it's very much impossible to show through your cameras. You need to take someone to Varanasi to show that, see, this is Varanasi, this is the spirituality, this is the holiness, this is the vastness of Varanasi. So that's how I think about Varanasi. That is my way of thinking, maybe different from others, but that's my advice for any new photographer who land up to Varanasi.
What about you, Rishi? What is your experience with photography of the place, given that you've been going to the city, you've lived in the city for far longer? How did you get into photography? I mean, one is obviously, the passion for photography, and if one is passionate about photography, then I think over a period of time one tends to end up seeing subjects, or things that usually people or tourists don't see. You tend to find the you tend to find things that will make for some good photos, not just because it's of a tourist spot, but even as we can see from this book, for example, something like this. If you look at this photo leaves me with so many thoughts and questions. What has your experience been?
So, Abhinav, I got into photography a long time ago. Back in the day, I used to have a point and shoot camera when I was in Varanasi. And it was a Kodak camera. Each roll used to cost about 200 rupees. By the time I was done with taking 36 photographs, we didn't all the pocket money was exhausted practically. So one had to ration how much you clicked. The journey started from there, and right after IIT, I went to IIM Calcutta, and then went to the US, and was lucky to lay my hands on the first 1 megapixel digital camera, which came out in 2002, and that was a $400-500 digital camera. I picked that up, and the journey started from there. But one thing that has stayed with me throughout is people often confuse a good photograph with a good camera, right? And I often give them a counter by asking them that if I were to give them a Sachin Tendulkar's bat, will you start batting like Sachin Tendulkar, right?
Exactly.
So,
Very, 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 very pertinent point.
so the bat is an important part of his overall batting, but a very small part of that batting, right? It is the art that, or it is the cricket in him which the bat enhances. Bat cannot produce the outcome by itself. It's the same thing with photography. Photography is basically visual storytelling. When somebody sees a photo, I should not have to, as a photographer, I should not have to sit and explain. It should invoke strong feelings, emotions, some poetry when they see a photograph. And that's the beauty of a good photograph, where the person who's watching it brings their own impressions, brings their own feelings, their own, spiritual, emotional energy along, and interprets the photograph. So every photograph technically is interpreted differently by different people. And a good photograph basically invokes those emotions. So that's one of the key differences between a snapshot and a photograph. Snapshot basically is presentation of various elements visually in a frame to tell which element was where. And photograph, on the contrary, has a lot of creativity, spirituality, emotion, all of that baked into what is presented. So what excites me is the tremendous power of that camera as a photographic tool to tell stories. And Banaras is one of those unique places where you stand anywhere, and that's what I do. I stand anywhere, capture a few photographs on the camera, and capture a lot of them as memories in my heart. To Arun's point earlier, you have to first see the photograph with your eye. Camera comes after that. So one needs to learn that art of seeing a frame from your eye, through your eye, and then camera comes in the front and captures it for eternity and for posterity.
In all of this, I have to mention the publisher, Jeetendra Anand, and Book Street Publications. I think it many people may not have heard of this, but this is they have come up with some really good books already, and this one is simply, I think, a timeless treasure. How did this collaboration come about between you and Jitendra Anand?
So Jitendra Anand is a wonderful human being. Over the period of time that this book came about, he became a great friend. But the original collaboration started because one of my very dear friends, Satish Tiruvenkataswamy, published his book called The Long Run with Book Street Publications, and he introduced me to Jitendra ji. When I started engaging with him, he was the kind of person who came across as someone so close to Varanasi, not the physical part of it, but the spiritual part of it. And that contentment and various other attributes of that gentleman touched me so deeply that we decided to put this piece of work together with him.
Arunda, tell me a little bit about your other photography, works, because I am fascinated. I have been dabbling in photography myself for more than 20 years, and I think, like a lot of people, I was also an accidental photographer. You go to a place, you go to visit a place, and you carry a camera with you. And I found myself taking lots of photos. Some of them were good, most of them were very average looking. And then I said that, okay, if I'm taking lots of photographs, let me at least try and learn a little bit about photography, and that's how I got into it. But tell us, so share some of your learnings, some of your experiences with over the years with photography.
Abhinav, already you have started with the introduction, and there you have told that as there in Indian Air Force for 16 years as a technical photographer. So that's how I started my photography career. Uh, so after getting retired voluntarily from Air Force, I just started doing photography of my own. But there was a gap between the starting professional photography and getting retired from the professional photography things. In between, I took some 3 to 4 years just to learn the nuances of photography, especially the art of photography. Generally, what's happened when you go to the professional part, that time you need to be more dependent upon the client's requirement, right? So whatever client is saying, you have to follow that. You have to please the client, or you have to make sure that whatever is requirement, you have to abide by. But that doesn't serve the purpose of your heart. When you are a photographer by heart, that time you always want to listen to your heart. So while listening to your heart, it doesn't always make your client satisfied. So that time there is a difference between being a professional photographer and a self-served photographer. So here this ambiguity comes, and I started making myself a photographer for myself. So I started understanding the photography, the art of photography, and a later part around maybe 2019 or 17, 18, 19 onward, I started doing the professional part a full-fledged with a full-fledged, and I started doing the mentoring thing also, just because then I could understand that there something have happened in me that I have learned and I can deliver to other people who are in need, right? So here one thing I just want to share, that many people have asked me, you see, I have started my photography career as a technical photographer. After that, I started doing landscape photography. Then I have started doing some for certain period of time I have done bird photography and wildlife photography. Then I have come to travel photography, people photography, festival photography, like that. So more or less I have traveled with all genre of photography, right? So someday, generally nowadays, at present nowadays, people know me more like a travel photographer and people photographer. So many clubs and many photography clubs, the photography institution, they have called me for lecture or for webinar regarding travel photography. One fine day, one of my friend from a particular photography club, he called me up and say, Arunda, I just want a webinar from your side. I said, okay, tell me what's the date, and maybe a travel photographer. No, Arunda, just we want to change the thing, because we have delivered a lot of travel things to people, but we have seen that there are very beautiful portraits in your portfolio. Your body of work, it reflects beautiful portrait. So why not to go with the portrait? Then I said, you are the first person who have understood me as a good portrait photographer also, because that is one of the very one of the very attractive parts of myself, of my own photography. So there are many things you do which maybe other people may be not knowing, just because in some other part you are more famous. So someday somebody has told me, so like that, in portrait photography, in travel photography, in sometimes some some people, those who are doing some photography tour in wildlife. So once they have hired me for their own wildlife this thing tour, just because they want to infuse the art of photography with wildlife photography. So for the particularly, they have hired me as a mentor. That is very unusual thing, and really I liked it. Okay, so someday somebody asked me that, okay, Arunda, what's your genre? Because we have seen that you are working in this genre, you are working in that genre, sometimes landscape. Because every year I go to Ladakh for this landscape photography, night sky photography. Many things happen in Ladakh also. I go to Varanasi, I go to Vrindavan, Mathura Vrindavan for that Nandgaon and Varsana Holi. I take people to Kannur for Theyyam photography in Kerala. So there are very diversified perspective of my photography career. So now somebody asked me that what is your main genre? Which genre you are into? I said that, see, bro, the thing is that I understand three or four things. If you have these three or four things in you, then a genre is just another word in the dictionary. See, to become a very good photographer, to understand your subject and execute that subject as a very good presentable photography, first you need to know light very perfectly. You understand light. Without understanding light, you will never become a good photographer. That's the first thing. Second thing, you must know the your composition. Composition is another part which makes your so-called dull photograph into a very attractive photograph. Okay. The third part is you must know your gear, whatever gear you are using, like your camera, your lens, your tripod, whether your tripod is good enough to hold the weight of your camera, whether the lens you are shooting with, if you are shooting a portrait and you are using a wide angle lens, then also it will work. But you need to know how to work with a wide angle lens for a portrait photograph. So like this, you need to know your gears. And the fourth thing, without which nothing will happen in photography, that is, you have to have a very good vision at the back of your mind. If you don't have that vision, it cannot create anything new. Whatever you will create, already thousands or lakhs people have already done, and that is another documentary shot. That shot will become another documentary shot on your behalf. If you want to make it stand out, you have to put your brain, you have to put your own vision. Without putting your vision, it cannot be possible. So by only using only these four things, you can be successful in any genre. Say you say maybe you a photographer who is more into landscape photography or maybe into travel photography. So someday somebody has told me, okay, you go and take a photograph of this fashion for a fashion portfolio you need to show. If he is a good photographer, if he knows light, indoor light and outdoor light, if he knows his camera, if he knows that what sort of lens is required for those things, so he can easily do it with his own vision. So that's what I say. You must have all these four things in your mind, and then you are bang into a target.
So I have to, okay, before I ask you a question, Rishi, I think what Arunda just talked about, lighting is obviously, light, poor lighting or not understanding lighting can ruin even the best of photographs. But to the point about the vision, I think typically what happens is that when we see something beautiful and we want to capture it on film, on a camera now, the tendency is to capture everything. Whatever we are seeing, we say that let's capture that on film, but that is not what makes a good photograph. Good photograph is at the end of it, at the heart of it, all about simplicity. What is it that you want to show, leaving aside everything else? So tell us a little bit about your photography, your learning experience. And you talked about in 2002, 20 years ago, starting out with their first digital camera. That's around, I think, in 2003, I think I got my first digital camera. And the fact that I could shoot 100 photographs without burning holes in every pocket that I had was liberating. But on the other hand, I don't think digital photography really helped. Just because I was able to take more photos, I don't think it helped become necessarily a better photographer. I think it afforded opportunities for learning because the cost of photography was now low. But without conscious effort, I don't think that craft can really be improved.
So, Abhinav, I'll start with a quote, right? And it's a very popular quote. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? Back in the day, when you had only 36 shots in one film, every shot that you were going to take, sufficient amount of thinking went before taking the shot. Today, when you know you can take as many shots as you want and there's no restriction there, oftentimes our creativity, our mind becomes very lazy. We don't take the stock, stop, pause, look around, view that in our head, feel the story that we want to tell, identify the subject that needs highlighting, look at the light around it. We don't do that. I mean, there is a iPhone in our hand and we put it on the burst mode, and within microseconds it would take 20 frames, and we often confuse that with a photograph. So that's a disadvantage of having too many resources at hand, because you could throw as many resources as you wanted, whereas in the erstwhile era you would ration everything that you took and put more creativity, greater thinking before you took a shot. So that's a significant difference. But assuming that a good photographer understands that it's a visual storytelling tool, and the most important part of photography is not the camera, it is the person behind the camera. And I'll give you an example, right? There are two people sitting in the balcony of a beautiful, rural, rustic, jungle kind of a setup. One would write a beautiful poem, and the second would just look at it and get bored, saying, okay, what do I do here? There is no internet, right? And that is the difference between different kinds of personalities, right? Same thing with painting, right? One would see something and would get inspired to pick up the brush or pick up a pencil, find a piece of paper and start expressing, whereas the other could get bored saying, okay, what's the big deal about this? So one clear thing to become a good photographer and I'll use a word in Hindi because I don't find an exact replica of that word in English. It's called Samvedanshil Man, Sanvedanshil Man, sensitive heart, right? Which can observe, which can feel, which can soak in, which can absorb, which can see using the mind's eye, and then a photograph becomes simple. But if these predecessors or precursors are not there, then I can give you the best camera on the planet, and what will come out is a garbage in, garbage out.
I am reminded of this one Sanskrit shloka that you have put in your book. And this is interesting because I learned Sanskrit only for 2 years in school for a variety of reasons. It's one of those things that I think a lot of us growing up then wouldn't really focus on Sanskrit. It was a third language that you had to study. The focus was always on, physics, chemistry, maths, and science, and so on. But in those 2 years, this among all the different things that we were taught and all, this shloka was one of the shlokas that I remember learning. And when I saw this in your book, this came back to me and brought a lot of memories. Perhaps you can talk about this. It is Alasasya kutah vidya avidasya kutah dhanam adhanasya kutah mitram amitrasya kutah sukham.
Would you want to translate that for our viewers so that everybody who doesn't understand?
I forgot. I assume that everyone listening will know more about Sanskrit than I do. But it is fairly self-explanatory. It says, you don't get knowledge if you are lazy. Alasasya kutah vidya. And if you don't have knowledge, then you won't get money. If you don't have money, you won't get friends, which is a whole philosophy in itself, I think. And without friends, you won't have happiness. Amitrasya kutah sukham. So you don't have happiness without friends. So it all starts with knowledge and the acquisition of knowledge and whatever goes into acquiring vidya.
So Abhinav, this shlok is there, has made its way into the book primarily because that's how Arunda and I have seen the people of Varanasi. You could find a job log on the ghat, a very normal looking individual in dhoti and some kurta, not dressed in any glam way. And in a 5-minute conversation, you might realize that that person is a very, very learned person. Understands Vedas, Shastras, Puranas, can recite age-old Sanskrit shlokas just like this, like the back of their hand. You might find, and one of the photographs I've included in the book, you'll find that one gentleman who's pursuing his music degree in BHU is sitting by the ghat in a ensconced place. It's a black and white photograph in the book, playing bansuri. And I saw it from a distance and he was playing it so beautifully. I just went and sat and spent half an hour just listening to his bansuri, and he was deep in his meditative stage and playing. What I'm giving you examples here, they are not very unique examples. You could just walk the ghats and come across many such personalities in a place like Varanasi. Right from Kabir to Tulsi to Bismillah Khan Sahib, to Girija Devi, to Lachu Maharaj, to Kishan Maharaj. There are umpteen number of examples of great people who have come out of those gullies. And in spite of all that knowledge, you will find that the people are so humble, so loving, so warm. They don't have the need to flash what they know or what they own. They typically own experiences more than money, more than resources. And that's something that I love about the people of Varanasi. I mean, I've seen people there, and there are two conflicting thoughts there. You will find a chai wala, and these are real examples of people from the place. You will find a chai wala who will open his chai ki dukaan at 7 a.m. in the morning, and that person has a goal in his head, simple goal, that aaj 300 rupiya bana to dukaan band. Now, if he earns 300 rupees in 2 hours, trust me, he will wrap up his shop after 2 hours and he'll be gone. He'll sit at the ghat, chit chat, chill out, enjoy, because there is a belief in his heart. And by the way, this person has no bank balance, right? He lives from day to day. But there is a belief in the heart that Annapurna ki nagari mein, Mahadev ki nagari mein, Ganga ki nagari mein, nobody will sleep hungry. And that belief, that contentment is awe-inspiring. I mean, today's age, when I just graduated, and if I had 10,000 rupees in my account, I would consider myself to be very wealthy. Today, even if you have 10 lakh rupee in your account, you'll feel as if you're not there yet. And that's where the people of Varanasi are just amazing. I mean, you have to spend time with them to realize how in this 21st century, where all of us are so fascinated by material pleasures and everything else, somebody can live such a content life, being there and enjoying his life, knowing, practicing, reading, writing, and so on and so forth. There's a high density of such people there.
So true, so true. I think so, folks. We have been talking with Rishi Agarwal and Arun Saha about their book, their coffee table book, Varanasi: A Passage to Immortality. It's been brought out by Book Street Publications, and here are some photographs from the book. This is for both you, Rishi and Arunda. If you want to, if you want to me to pause at any photo and you want to share anything that strikes you that you want to share with us when you took the photograph, what was going on, or anything that you want to talk about.
So if you go to the previous photo, Abhinav, I would want to spend a minute on this. You'll find a couple of photographs of this kind in the book. And Varanasi is known for Banarsi saris. And there's a whole genre of people who, and right from Kabir's time, who was a weaver, who's born in that family himself, there's this whole class of people who focused on weaving beautiful Banarsi saris. What most people see is the outcome of that weave. What we have attempted to do is go to some of the families who are in the background, who are never visible, who spend days, weeks, and months putting a beautiful Banarsi sari together on the handloom. And what you're seeing here is one such handloom and one such sari being produced there. And if you go to such a place, first of all, you'll not find them easily. But once you go there, you'll be surprised with the kind of darkness that there is, because most of them are very poor, can't afford too much light there. Most of them will have one bulb. That bulb is visible right there. They'll start their day at 7 or 8 in the morning. They'll work for about 9 to 12 hours, depending on what is the timeline. And it's such a complex thing. And when he started explaining to me how a sari gets done on a handloom, for the first time in my life, I started appreciating the art as to how difficult it is, how much mathematics is there, how much care and attention is required when you are using that Tana Bana in order to weave. And this is one such photograph of the people behind the scenes who do such an amazing job of creating a sari, and all they make is about 100 rupees to 150 rupees a day. They're all informal workers working in that area, and they produce such monumental outputs.
Amazing.
I think Arunda can talk at length about everything around Dev Deepavali. The previous photo that you saw is captured on the day of Dev Deepavali. And we have written extensively about the festival, and there are multiple photographs, including the cover page of the book is the shot from Dev Deepavali. Arunda, go ahead.
Correct.
Yeah.
Just breaking this one. This is the cover of the book, folks, and this is the Dev Deepavali photograph that Rishi was just mentioning.
Yeah, right. Again, this is the Dev Deepavali photo. See, the whole India know about Deepavali, but hardly people know about Dev Deepavali. It is the main, you can say the most celebrated festival in Varanasi. So it happens some 15 days after the actual Deepavali date. And during this day, all the ghats means in front of that, what are I think there are 64 ghats, right, Rishi?
There are 80 ghats. 80 is
yeah, 80 ghats are there. Almost all the ghats are being lit by diyas, in number of diyas, different type of diyas and different patterns, different sculpture, like many things things happen during those days. So when you look at this, at the ghats from the Ganga, means from the water side, you will see there's a beautiful array of lightning all over the Varanasi Ghat. So that's the most beautiful sight one can see in Varanasi. This photograph second is taken in one of the Ghat of Varanasi, where these people they what they do every year, they used to make a drawing of Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva, we know Varanasi more because of Lord Shiva. So Lord Shiva's painting is there in different forms. Sometimes it is linga form, sometimes it is some other trishul form. Other picture, you might have seen that picture. That is a trishul form. So they decorate and show how Varanasi is being built over the years to Lord Shiva's names. Right. So this is how this one. This one is that Trishul. So these are so huge. These paintings and this after making the painting, they put diyas on that and throughout, and they put the light on it. These are so huge that hardly with a normal lens you can cover the entire part. So you need to have a very good wide angle lens. I have used a 15-30 mm wide angle lens in the 15 mm part, and that's how from a certain point I tried to cover the entire thing with the visibility of the people standing around, just to show that the ambience, without the ambience, just shooting this lighting is not sufficient enough to let people know about this festival. Okay, so like this, many photographs of there of this, like see this photograph, this is another street wall painting. So nowadays, during this time, previously Rishi was telling about the makeover of Varanasi Ghats and streets and all. Nowadays, earlier it was so untidy and so scattered here and there. But nowadays, if you see a street in Varanasi like this, you'll say, "Wow, when it was there." So it is a recent days you can see the ghats and street in Varanasi in such a beautiful arrangement and a tidy way they have maintained the ghats. So this is one of my very favorite portrait of the Sadhu of Varanasi Ghat, because just it is not just a portrait. It is, see, just Abhinav, you asked me in your one of your previous questions that some you wanted to know some of my experience over the years of my photography. So when at the very earlier day, when I used to take when I used to do the portrait photography, so that time one thing used to come to my mind, that if when I'm shooting a portrait of a subject and when that particular person look at me directly, so immediately I used to think that, oh, my portrait is gone. It is not a candid, and once the portrait is not candid, it is not a portrait. But
Yeah,
after
right.
years, after shooting people more and more, one thing that came in my mind, that unless until your subject, your portrait subject is not looking to you through your lens, the communication is not made. So here in this picture, if you see this picture, the priest, that sadhu, is looking directly to the lens, and thus he has made a communication to the lens, like it shows his anger, his dissatisfaction, or whatever it is there inside of it, that is coming out. And that shows the vividness, that his personality, vividness of his personality, and the strength of his attire and personality, right? Now when he's making that communication with the lens, in the way, in the process, he's making the communication with the author also, whoever is shooting the photograph. And later on, when that author, when he's projecting this photograph to anyone, let's see, here we have projected this photograph here for our viewer, or maybe in the book. So when somebody, again somebody is else is looking at the picture, now that communication been made between that viewer and this subject, this sadhu. So this is the multiple way of communication made from one person to another person to another person. So that's how you can make your photograph to a perfect one. So that's how we try to make this book more successful. And this is the Sandha Arti in the Ghat. Generally, people take it in some other way. So I tried to pour my heart out to show the maximum intensity of this photograph through this photograph of the Ghat of this Sandha Arti.
So Folks, this has been our Indica Books Q&A with Rishi Agarwal and Arun Saha. They are the authors, they are the photographers of the coffee table book Varanasi, A Passage to Immortality. It's been published by Book Street Publications. It is available on Amazon and on other websites. I would strongly encourage you to add this to your bookshelves, read it, talk about it, share it, discuss it. And I think if it inspires you to go make a trip to Varanasi, and if it inspires you to take up photography in a more meaningful way and to bring out some of the, not just to take snapshots, but take photographs, as Rishi and Arunda said, I think it'll be that much more. It'll be that much more rewarding an experience. Uh, Thank you so much for spending the time and talking to us. I at least got the feeling that I was partly in Varanasi. Obviously, uh, the city calls out to all of us, and I hope we get to see lots more photographs from you. And congratulations again on this wonderful, wonderful book. And again to Sri Jeetendra Anand for coming out with this lavishly produced and such a high quality book.
Well, thank you so much, Abhinav, for having us here. And there's only one desire in my heart as we wrap the session up, which is hopefully this session helps some people to put Varanasi on their travel bucket list.
Thank you so much, Abhinav. It's a pleasure being with you here.
Thank you. Thank you. And namaskar. And we'll meet again in another Q&A session. Thank you, everyone.